good evening wherever you are in the world. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there? This is a gentle journey into the oldest dream of humankind. Freedom, across ancient rivers and empires, through the voices of those once bound in chains. We will drift together toward the story of Spartacus, the gladiator who rose against Rome. Close your eyes, slow your breath, and let the whispers of freedom carry you. In the hush of a late night, when the world is draped in darkness and the mind drifts on gentle currents, let us wander together through the corridors of time. There is a voice whispering in the stillness, an ageless lament and an undying hope. It speaks of freedom. It speaks of human dignity. It is the quiet, persistent song of the soul, yearning across millennia for liberty. Imagine, dear listener, that you are floating above the ages, weightless as a sigh. Below you unfolds the grand tapestry of history, woven with triumph and travail, gilded by empire and stained by suffering. In this timeless night, we will follow a thread through that tapestry, a thread spun from the lives of those who lived and died in bondage, and the fiery spirit that ever urged them toward freedom. We move slowly, softly, as in a dream. Let the world around you fade, and see instead with the inner eye. Flickering images of ancient lands appear out of the darkness, inviting us to witness their secrets. Freedom, for those born to it, the concept often slips by unnoticed, like air, invisible, taken for granted, yet vital. But for those denied it, for the souls in chains, freedom is a dream that colors every moment, a star shining in the mind's night sky. Throughout the ages, even in the most oppressive times, there were hearts that dared to dream of that star. Even when shackles bit deep into flesh, the human spirit, like a wild bird, beat its wings against the cage, seeking the open skies. The desire to be free, to walk one's own path, to labor for oneself and loved ones, to speak one's own truth, is as eternal as the wind. And so, with the night as our guide, we drift back to the very cradles of civilization, to see how this struggle between bondage and liberty first began. The air grows warm and dry as we descend toward a great river valley under a bronze dawn. Hear the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of reeds. Smell the faint perfume of lotus blossoms on the current. We have arrived in ancient Egypt, land of pharaohs and pyramids, circa 5,000 years ago. On the western bank of the Nile, the sky is just lightning. The morning star still twinkles faintly above, watching over a scene of toil. There, silhouetted against the dawn, a line of laborers drags heavy stones toward a rising pyramid. Their backs strain, sweat beads on their brows even in the cool morning. An overseer's whip snaps in the air with a sharp crack, urging them on. Among these toilers are men and women who wear chains on their ankles or ropes around their wrists. They are slaves, some born into servitude, others taken as prisoners in war, all now bound to the will of the divine king. Listen closely. In the dim half-light, one of these enslaved laborers hums under his breath a plaintive tune. It is an old lullaby from his homeland far to the south, a song his mother once sang to him. His name is Teramun. He was not always a slave. He remembers being a child free in the Nubian hills, feeling the sun on his face and the wind in his hair as he ran with his brothers. But those days are gone. He was captured years ago during a border skirmish and brought to this strange northern land. Now he spends his days hauling bricks and stones for Pharaoh's grand monuments. His once proud shoulders bear scars from the lash. Yet, as Teramun hums, there is a stubborn spark in his eyes. In his heart, he clings to dignity, the one thing his masters have not fully taken. The Egyptian scribes do not write Teramun's name on their papyrus scrolls. To them, he is just Bak, a worker, or Hem, a servant, perhaps even Sokar Ankh, one who has been struck down, a living prisoner of war. Many of the slaves here are like him, captives seized in Pharaoh's campaigns in Nubia and Canaan, marched in chains back to Egypt to toil for the rest of their days. In carved temple reliefs, you can see their images, rows of defeated soldiers with their hands bound tight behind their backs. The Egyptian kingdom grows mighty on the backs of such forced labor. Yet life for these slaves is a paradox. In some households, a servant might be treated almost like family, trusted and valued by his master. A few even rise in status or earn their freedom over time. But for most, like Teramun, the days are endless drudgery beneath the sun and the gaze of gods and kings. Teramun trudges forward, pulling the heavy sled that bears an immense block of stone. His muscles tremble with exhaustion. With each step, chains clink, a soft, sorrowful music of captivity. He risks a glance upward at the pyramid taking shape, a mountain of stone climbing to the sky, meant to grant a pharaoh eternal life among the stars. Teramun wonders, will his own name be remembered by anyone? Will his spirit too find some freedom in the afterlife? He whispers a prayer under his breath, not to the pharaoh's gods, but to his own ancestors, asking for strength to survive another day with his humanity intact. Nearby, another figure stands watching the laborers. A young Egyptian boy, the son of an overseer. He watches Teramun and the others straining and hears their low song. The boy's heart is troubled. His father has told him that these foreigners are prisoners, that this is the natural order. Egypt rules and others serve. But the boy sees the haunted look in Teramun's eyes and feels a pang of empathy. In the boy's hand is a water jug. Acting on impulse, he runs forward and offers a drink to the weary slave. Teramun pauses, surprised by the kindness. He accepts the water, and for a moment, their eyes meet. In that silent exchange, across the gulf of master and slave, flows a brief recognition of shared humanity. A barked order shatters the moment. The overseer strides over, scolding the boy and roughly yanking him back. Teramun bows his head and returns to hauling, the taste of water and the memory of fleeting kindness lingering like a blessing. The overseer raises his whip and lashes the last man in the line. An older captive whose step has faltered. The old man cries out and stumbles. Teramun and another slave quietly grasp the man's arms, helping him stay on his feet. They share the burden of the stone, taking on extra weight to spare the elder further punishment. Though they have been beaten down, these slaves still care for one another in small ways. Solidarity is the only shield they have against the cruelty of fate. As the sun climbs higher, more slaves arrive from the mud brick barracks by the river. Some are Egyptians themselves, peasants fallen on hard times who sold themselves or their children when famine struck, or who were enslaved for debts they could not repay. In this kingdom, even one's own freedom can be lost if fortune turns ill. Women are here too, carrying baskets of clay and water to make mortar. A few children dart about, the sons and daughters of slaves, born into bondage from the moment of their first breath. The day wears on. Heat beats down. Occasionally, a foreman allows a brief rest. The slaves huddle in whatever shade they can find, gulping the meager rations of beer and bread allotted to them. They speak in hushed tones. One woman murmurs about her past. She was once a dancer in a village by the sea before raiders stole her away. An older man, his hair gone white, tells a story of a time long ago when Pharaoh Djoser proclaimed that a slave who served faithfully could be granted land of his own. Perhaps just a legend, but it gives them a glimmer of hope. Then there are stories of horror too. A companion who tried to run away, recaptured and branded on the forehead with the mark of a criminal so all would know his status. Teramon recalls the sight of that man's punishment. How they held him down and seared his flesh with a hot iron. The smell of burning skin, the man's screams echoing off the stone quarry walls. Teramon shuts his eyes tight, banishing the memory. He returns in his mind to his Nubian home, imagining the cool forests at twilight, the sound of his mother's voice, anything but the present reality. By evening, as the day's labors end, the slaves trudge back to their cramped quarters. Some are so exhausted they can barely lift their feet. The sky over the desert turns a bruised purple and gold. Teramon lingers for a moment at the door of the barracks and gazes west, where the sun is melting into the dunes. In that dying light, dust motes dance in the air like souls in flight. Teramon wonders if perhaps part of him, the free part inside, can fly away with them into the sky. Far across the sands, Pharaoh sits in a palace of painted pillars, perhaps composing an edict about the distribution of laborers for a new temple. In his world of power, slaves are numbers in accounting ledgers, assets to be used. Indeed, Egyptian records speak coldly of human lives owed to the state. Condemned with all his family to labor for life on state land, reads one ancient papyrus decree against a man who tried to flee servitude. Another boastful inscription of a warrior king announces the capture of tens of thousands of foreign men, women, and children, their hands tied behind them, enslaved and even branded with the king's name. Such words were carved in stone to celebrate empire, but behind them lay countless lives like Teramon's, each with their own sorrows and small joys, each yearning quietly for deliverance. Now the scene begins to fade. The sands of Egypt swirl and dissolve like mist as we float onward, carried by the current of time. The lullaby that Teramon hummed still hangs in the air, a gentle, mournful note that follows us like a guiding star. Keep that note in your mind as we journey on, for the song of the slave soul will resurface in many lands. Glide eastward now, across deserts and mountains, following the path of the rising sun. The air grows drier, the terrain more rugged, until we see below us another great ribbon of water nourishing an ancient civilization. Two rivers, twin serpents of silver, wind through a fertile plain. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. Here the first cities rose from clay and reed, and here too the story of slavery continued its relentless course. Night has fallen over Babylon. The year might be around 1750 BC, and the great city stands proud under the rule of King Hammurabi. High walls encircle Babylon, and within, the narrow streets are alive with torchlight and murmuring voices even at this late hour. We drift down into one such street. It leads to an open marketplace near a towering ziggurat that disappears into the starry sky. In the marketplace, a few stalls remain open, lanterns casting a flickering orange glow on the faces of those gathered. But this is not a bazaar for spices or grain. It is a slave market. A cluster of people stand upon a wooden platform. They are of various ages: a teenage boy with fear in his eyes, a middle-aged woman holding a toddler close to her chest, a bearded man scowling in anger. Their clothes are dusty and torn. Around each of their necks is an iron collar, and from each collar hangs a bronze tag inscribed with symbols, likely the mark of their former owner or the agent selling them. They have been penned like cattle behind a makeshift fence until moments ago. Now, one by one, they are being presented to the buyers who stroll the market with heavy purses. Under a date palm tree, a slender young man named Artie stands watching this scene. By his dress, we can tell he is not a slave. His linen robe is clean and finely woven. He holds a writing tablet under one arm. Artie is a scribe's apprentice, sent here by his master to record the sales. He tries to keep a neutral expression on his face, but inside, his stomach is turning. He has never been to the slave market before. He watches as the auctioneer calls out prices and attributes. A strong boy, good for farm work, healthy teeth. Goings. A skilled weaver, only 30 years old, she can spin and sew. This man has experience tending goats. The buyers, prosperous merchants, minor officials, or priests from the temple, examine the human goods. They prod the man's muscles, inspect the boy's mouth, gaze appraisingly at the frightened child in the woman's arms. Artie dutifully notes down the agreed prices in cuneiform on his tablet. 5 shekels of silver for the boy, 10 for the woman and her child, sold as a pair, a bargain, someone chuckles. 8 for the goat herd. With each entry he etches, Artie feels a weight on his heart. He recalls the teachings of the temple, that the god Marduk cherishes justice and that the king's laws are meant to protect the weak. Yet here the weak are being bartered away as property. Is this justice? Artie glances up at the immense code of Hammurabi stele standing not far off in the temple courtyard. The laws of the land engraved in stone. He knows some of those laws. They say if a slave runs away and someone shelters him, that person can be put to death. They say if a slave tells his master, "You are not my master," his ears shall be cut off. The laws speak of slaves as things to be controlled, returned, punished. Artie's gaze shifts to the face of the stone king carved atop the stele, receiving law from the sun god. By that divine authority, the world is as it is. Some are masters, some are slaves. His task done, Artie leaves the market. But he cannot shake the image of the woman's face as she was led away, her child clinging to her neck. The moon is rising over Babylon's rooftops, and Artie walks without noticing where his feet take him. He passes by a narrow alley where an old blind beggar is singing a melancholy tune. The words of the song catch Artie's ear. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, we wept. The old man is singing in a tongue not native to these parts. It is a Hebrew lament, the song of exiles brought here in chains generations ago. Artie stops to listen. The beggar's song speaks of yearning for a lost homeland, of tears and remembrance. Though Artie doesn't understand all the words, the emotion transcends the language. He closes his eyes and feels the sorrow in that melody. Babylon, splendid city, is also a city of countless captive souls, peoples conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar's armies, from Jerusalem to Tyre, living out their days as servants in a foreign land. Artie drops a coin into the beggar's bowl and quietly asks where he learned that song. The old man's unseeing eyes seem to look right through him as he replies, "I was born by another river, far away, taken when I was a child. Only the song remains." Artie feels a sting of tears in his own eyes. He bows respectfully and continues on his way. He finds himself wandering through a residential quarter. Through an open window, Artie hears laughter and the clink of dishes, a family at dinner. He peeks and sees a kindly scene. The father telling a story, the mother feeding a baby, an elderly grandmother chuckling. In the corner of the lamplight, a young girl, perhaps a domestic slave, pours wine for the father's cup. She moves deftly, unobtrusively. When the baby fusses, she gently rocks the cradle with a practiced hand, allowing the mother to eat. The family scarcely acknowledges her, but expects her presence. Artie notes the girl's calm, blank expression. He wonders what her name is. What fate brought her into their home? Is she one of the lucky ones, treated well in a respectable household? Perhaps, though she is still not free. Artie's thoughts turn to the nature of slavery in his society. He knows that in Babylon, slaves come from many paths. There are those captured in war, yes, and foreign children sold in the bustling slave markets. But sometimes, it is debt or desperation that forges the shackles. Artie's own uncle once told him of a famine in the countryside decades ago, when starving farmers sold themselves into servitude just to eat. A slave is always fed and clothed. Artie recalls his uncle saying bitterly, while a free man might starve. In Mesopotamia, the line between freedom and slavery can blur during hard times. Yet there is another side to the story that Artie also knows. Unlike some other lands, Babylonia has certain customs that soften the edges of slavery. Slaves here can own property of their own, even other slaves in some cases. A diligent slave might save enough over years to buy his freedom. It's happened before. A tale circulated about two slave brothers who hired themselves out during harvest and earned a whole gur of grain in wages, eventually purchasing their liberty. And the law provides some protections. If a master blinds or maims a slave, he must compensate him. And if a master frees a slave and adopts him as a son, the former slave becomes a citizen. Artie has heard of one such case in the court records. A faithful household slave freed and made heir when the master died childless. It's not common, but it is possible. He walks on past a statue of the goddess Ishtar glimmering in the moonlight. At her feet, someone has left an offering of bread and dates. Ishtar is the goddess of both love and war. Perhaps a supplicant prayed here for a husband's safe return from battle, or for a loved one's release from slavery. Artie thinks of the saying he overheard once in the scribal school. In war, all suffer. The victors bear wounds on their bodies and memories in their dreams. But the vanquished often lose everything, even their freedom. Mesopotamia's chronicles are full of wars. Akkadians, Sumerians, Assyrians, Babylonians. Each empire, in its turn, took prisoners. Those prisoners became servants in palaces, laborers in fields, or miners in the Zagros Mountains. Some were forced to toil on grand projects, digging canals under the hot sun or raising city walls brick by brick. The mighty King Hammurabi himself, who unified these lands, is known to have proclaimed laws against unjust debt slavery. Yet he also took pride in calling himself the destroyer of enemies, many of whom doubtless ended up in fetters. Artie eventually finds himself at the Grand Processional Way, the avenue that leads to the famed Ishtar Gate. Even at night, the gate's blue-glazed bricks shine, adorned with striding golden bulls and dragons. Artie pauses here, for a small procession is passing. 2 temple guards carry torches, flanking a robed priest. Behind them, on ropes, shuffle half a dozen individuals, offerings, he realizes, for the temple service. They are being donated by a wealthy noble as penance for a sin. The priest chants softly as they walk, prayers to purify these souls for a life of sacred servitude. The people on ropes are not struggling. Their faces are blank, resigned. Perhaps this fate is kinder than some others. To be a temple servant might mean a stable life, feeding the gods' sacred herds, or brewing beer for ceremonies. One young man in the group, however, has tears glistening on his cheeks. Artie catches his whisper as he passes. "Farewell, my beloved. Think of me." It sounds as if he is leaving someone he loves behind. A guard barks for silence. Artie's heart clenches. Each of these people had a life, a family, dreams. Now they will have only duty until death. When the last of the procession disappears into the temple compound, Artie stands alone by the Ishtar Gate. He lifts his eyes to the stars just visible above the city's glow. He finds the North Star, remembering that in some cultures it is seen as the eye of a god, watching over the enslaved and oppressed. Under the same sky, across the world, others gaze up tonight, perhaps even slaves, praying for deliverance. Artie makes a silent vow under those stars. He will remember what he has seen this night. The scribe's apprentice might not have the power to change the world, but he carries within him the knowledge that these lives matter. Perhaps one day he will write stories or laws that show mercy to those in chains. For now, though, his path leads him home to a simple mat in his master's courtyard. He lies down and lets the night breeze wash over him. In his half-sleep, he imagines that old beggar's Hebrew song again, blending with Teramin's Egyptian lullaby from centuries earlier. 2 melodies of longing intertwine across time and space, a harmony of sorrow and hope. We drift onward, leaving Mesopotamia behind. The twin rivers fade into darkness. Time's river carries us further, and as it flows, centuries turn like pages in a book. Our next destination emerges on a distant shore, where olives and grapevines grow under a gentle sun. The land of ancient Greece. It is now perhaps the 5th century BC, an age of philosophers and poets, of marble temples and bustling agora. Yet beneath the famed Parthenon's shadow, another tale of slavery unfolds, different in shape but alike in suffering. The scene crystallizes in Athens, the city of wisdom. The afternoon light is golden, and we find ourselves in a quiet courtyard behind a fine house. The air is sweet with the scent of jasmine climbing the garden wall. Under an olive tree, a young woman named Kira kneels as she grinds barley in a stone mortar. She is dressed in a plain woolen chiton. At a glance, one might take her for the lady of the house's handmaiden, or perhaps a poor relative helping out. In truth, Kira is a slave, owned by the master of this household. As she works, she hums a fragment of a tune. an old island song her mother taught her. The rhythmic crunch of grain under the pestle accompanies her soft voice. Across the yard, a pair of small boys chase each other with wooden swords. They are the master's sons, playing at Heroes of Myth. They hardly notice Kira except to call for a snack. She smiles and promises them honeyed figs if they behave. Kira's life is not harsh at this moment. In fact, many would say she is fortunate. She was born a slave in this household. Her mother was a slave before her, but the family is moderately kind. They entrusted her with raising the children from infancy, and the boys adore her in their own way. She sleeps on a mat by the kitchen hearth, eats the family's leftover bread, and wears their cast-off clothes. By Athenian law, she cannot be sold arbitrarily if she has been in the household for years, and it is forbidden for a stranger to strike her. Only her master has that authority. In public, an Athenian slave like Kira dresses no differently from a poor citizen. Sometimes people even mistake slaves for free folk. It's said that in Athens, you must be careful. If you struck someone thinking them a slave, you might find you've hit a fellow citizen and get in trouble. Such is the relatively relaxed atmosphere here compared to the rigid brutality elsewhere. Yet despite these surface comforts, Kira is not free. Her day is ruled by the household's demands. She rises before dawn to fetch water from the fountain house, carrying heavy amphoras on her shoulders. She bakes bread, weaves cloth, tends to the children. If she performs well, she might never feel the lash. Indeed, her master prides himself on rarely using force. But the threat is always there, unspoken. Kira has seen what happened to the neighbor's cook who accidentally broke a valuable pot. He was whipped and then sold off to a trader from Thrace. The fear of being sold, of being torn from the only home she knows and shipped off to some distant land, keeps Kira obedient. Her chains are largely invisible, but they bind her soul. She cannot leave Athens, cannot marry or have legitimate children. Any child she bears would belong to her master. Cannot decide her own fate. This afternoon, however, a gentle reverie has come over her. Perhaps it's the golden light or the boy's laughter that triggers a memory. Kira thinks of a story she once overheard from an elderly slave woman in the market, a story of a lawgiver named Solon. Long ago, Solon had reformed Athens and, it was said, abolished the enslavement of citizens for debt. In those times before Solon, many Athenians who fell into debt would end up as slaves to their creditors, even sold abroad. Solon put an end to that, releasing those enslaved by debt and forbidding such bondage among Athenians. Kira doesn't fully grasp the politics of it, but the idea glows in her mind. Somewhere in history, chains were broken by a wise leader. If debt slaves could be freed, maybe one day all slaves might be free. It's a distant dream, but it comforts her. In fact, just a generation ago she heard, the city of Athens itself granted freedom to slaves who fought in a war against Sparta. Over 20,000 slaves seized that chance and fled servitude when the Spartan army invited them to rebel. Such events are whispered among the servant classes, fueling quiet fantasies of liberation. Kira's musings are interrupted by a call from inside. "Kira, bring wine for the guests." The master has visitors, fellow merchants gathering for a symposium, a drinking discussion. Immediately, Kira wipes her hands, straightens her dress, and heads to the storage room where large clay jars of wine are kept. She fills a jug, mixes in water, for the Greeks dilute their wine, and gracefully carries a tray of cups to the andron, the men's hall. As she slides open the door and enters with bowed head, she catches snippets of the conversation. The men recline on couches, garlanded with ivy, engaged in debate. One voice, the master's friend Lysander, proclaims loudly, "It's like Aristotle says, some people are slaves by nature. They lack the rational part of the soul that rules, and so they are better off being ruled by others." Another, slightly drunk, chimes in with a laugh. "Yes, living tools, Aristotle calls them, animated property. Where would we be without our living tools to do the hard work?" The men chuckle. Kira's face remains a mask, but inside she feels a sting. Living tools. Is that truly how they see her? Aristotle, a learned philosopher she's heard spoken of with reverence, thinks people like her are mere instruments, like a plow or a pot, only alive. She bites her tongue and focuses on pouring the wine smoothly into each cup. As she circulates, another guest, a plump man with flushed cheeks, reaches out and roughly pinches Kira's arm. "Lovely Kira," he slurs. "Come pour next to me." She forces a polite smile and complies, but steps just out of his reach. The master notices and says sharply, "Mind your manners, Philios." "She's not a courtesan for your sport." Philios raises his hands in mocking defense. Of course. But why so protective? She's just a slave." The master frowns, but doesn't reply directly. Perhaps he has some genuine affection, or at least proprietary pride for Kira, having watched her grow up in his household. In any case, he changes the subject back to trade matters. Kira withdraws once her task is done. Her cheeks burn, partly from embarrassment, partly from anger at the casual, dehumanizing words. In the hallway, she passes another house slave, Demos, the old doorkeeper. He pats her shoulder kindly. He heard it too. "Pay it no mind," Demos whispers. "Men full of wine speak foolishly." Demos has been with the family forever and has a grandfatherly aura. Kira nods and sighs. She returns to the kitchen to continue her chores. Yet Lysander's words echo in her head. Slaves by nature. Perhaps Aristotle never toiled a day in his life. She thinks, grinding her teeth as she resumes grinding barley. How easy for a free man of leisure to pronounce such judgments. In her heart, she knows the truth, that she is not some lower species of being. She recalls another saying she once overheard at the market from a traveling orator. "Zeus has given freedom to all men. Zeus has not made anyone a slave." Who said that? Was it Alcidamas? Yes, that was his name. The philosopher Alcidamas boldly declared that by nature no one is born a slave. Kira clings to that thought. Perhaps there are thinkers in the world who see slaves as human, fully and equally. Evening falls, and the guests depart. Kira puts the children to bed with gentle lullabies. As she tucks them in, one of the boys sleepily asks, "Will you always be here with us, Kira?" The question pricks her heart. "For as long as you need me," she answers softly. It is the only truth she can offer. Watching their innocent faces as they drift to sleep, she hopes the world will be kinder to them, that they will grow to be men who treat those under them with empathy. If she has any influence, it will be by quietly teaching them compassion alongside their alphabet. Now, while Athens sleeps, let us slip away to another corner of the Greek world, one far different in character. We fly over mountains and valleys to the south, toward the fierce city-state of Sparta. There is no city wall here. The Spartans boast that their bronze shields are their only walls. It is dark, perhaps midnight, on the plains of Laconia. The moon hangs low. In the distance, the peak of Mount Taygetus is a black silhouette against a scatter of stars. Out in the open fields of Sparta, rows of low huts are nestled near an orchard. These are the dwellings of the Helots, the unfree peasant class owned by the Spartan state. Unlike chattel slaves elsewhere, the Helots are an entire conquered people, the Messenians and others, kept in serfdom for generations. They farm the lands for their Spartan masters, handing over the bulk of their harvests. They outnumber the Spartans by many times, and for that, they are both feared and brutally controlled. On this night, silence blankets the huts. But a boy named Theron cannot sleep. He is 17, a Helot born to Helot parents. By rights, at his age he should be married and starting his own farmstead. But none of the Helots marry until the masters permit it. Theron lies on a pallet of straw, staring at the wooden roof beams, listening. What is he listening for? Any noise, any hint of the cryptaia? The very word sends a chill through him. Cryptaia is the Spartan secret guard, comprised of young Spartan men sent out to terrorize the Helot population. Every year, officially, the Spartan ephors, magistrates, declare war on the Helots. It is a ritual that makes it legal for any Spartan to kill a Helot without religious penalty. Under this cruel practice, bands of selected Spartan youths roam at night, tasked with silently murdering any Helots who seem strong or dissident. This systematic horror is designed to instill fear, to cull the brave, and to remind every Helot that they live at the knife's edge of the oppressor's whim. Theron has heard whispers that the cryptaia have been seen in the area this week. 2 days ago, a neighbor's body was found by the road at dawn, throat cut. The Spartan authorities claimed he was caught plotting rebellion, but everyone knows he was just a particularly tall and defiant young man, perhaps too physically imposing for the Spartans' comfort. Ever since, Theron's village has been on edge. The elders advise everyone to lay low, avoid gatherings, and show utmost deference if approached by any Spartan. Theron rises quietly from his bed, careful not to wake his younger brother, sleeping beside him. Stepping outside the hut, he breathes in the cool night air. The fields stretch out, silvered by moonlight. In the distance, he can make out the outline of Sparta's buildings, and closer by, the estate manor of their Spartan overlord, perched on a small hill. Theron's hands clench unconsciously. He spends his days toiling in that man's fields. Yet never is he allowed beyond the kitchen door of the manor. He remembers with bitterness how, last autumn, after a record barley harvest, thanks to the Helots' hard work, the Spartan came and simply demanded more tribute, leaving the Helot families short on grain for winter. A few Helot men muttered that it would have been better to hide some of the crop. But fear won out. They delivered everything asked and went hungry. Lost in thought, Theron wanders to the edge of the orchard. He nearly cries out in surprise as a figure emerges from behind an olive tree. It is Melit, a girl he knows well. They grew up together. She puts a finger to her lips. They sit beneath the tree and speak in hushed whispers. Melit's eyes glisten with tears. "They took my father," she says unsteadily. "Yesterday, the Spartans came, accused him of keeping extra wine. He's gone, Theron." He holds her hand as she trembles. Her father, an old Helot, had been a kind, jovial soul, now likely killed without ceremony. "I'm so sorry," Theron whispers, his throat tight. He dares not speak words of anger too loudly. But inside a flame of rage leaps up. How much more can they endure? Melit's father had done nothing, harmed no one. Melit wipes her eyes. "My mother says we must be brave and silent, that we cannot change things. But I cannot help hating them." Her voice shakes, turning to venom on the last words. Theron gently squeezes her hand. He wants to say something hopeful, but the truth is, here in Sparta, hope is dangerous. He recalls an old story of a helot named Cynodon some decades ago, who actually tried to lead a revolt. Cynodon was caught and executed horribly, and the repression only grew worse after that. The Spartans are always on guard. They live in as much fear of the helots as the helots live in fear of them. It is said that a Spartan man cannot get drunk at his syssitia, their communal feast, without making a helot drink pure wine to the point of stupefaction and humiliation, a grim demonstration to their youth about the supposed inferiority of the enslaved. They force helots to wear coarse clothing and even beat them yearly for no reason, so that they never forget they were slaves, as one chronicler wrote. The cruelty is the point. As Melite and Theron sit together under that olive tree, they feel utterly powerless. Yet, in their very companionship, there is a seed of resilience. "We must survive," Theron finally murmurs. "For each other, we must." Melita nods through her tears. In Sparta's harsh world, the helots' love and solidarity are acts of quiet rebellion. Suddenly, across the silent field, there's a flicker of movement. Theron tenses, 3 dark shapes gliding between rows of crops, not far off. Could it be wolves? No, wolves don't carry spears. Cryptaya. Instinctively, Theron and Melite press themselves flat to the ground behind the tree's low stone wall. Heart pounding in his ears, Theron watches as the stealthy Spartan youths move methodically. They stop near a certain helot's hut, the family of the neighbor who'd been found dead. One of the figures slips inside soundlessly. There is no scream. After a few moments, they emerge, likely having eliminated another perceived threat as he slept. Theron feels Melit's grasp on his arm tighten painfully. He knows she sees it too. One of the Spartans lets out a low chuckle that carries in the night air. Then, as silently as they came, they vanish into the darkness. Melit is shaking. Theron's mouth is dry. A wave of nausea hits him. That could have been either of them. Any of them. The message is clear. Never feel safe. He urges Melit to go back home and bolt her door. "Tomorrow," he whispers, not finishing the thought that maybe they should pretend nothing happened. She nods and slips away. Alone, Theron sinks to his knees and finally lets the tears come, hot and angry. In the secrecy of the night, he allows himself this release. Above, the indifferent stars witness the young man's grief and fury. How many helots before him have cried out to the gods for deliverance? Do the gods hear? The old tales say the helots once prayed to Apollo for liberation. And in time, an earthquake struck Sparta, nearly toppling it. The Spartans feared it was divine wrath for their treatment of helots. But still, nothing truly changed. The oppression continued for centuries. Wiping his face, Theron stands and walks back to his hut. Before he enters, he looks once more toward the horizon, in the direction of the sea. He whispers a wish, that perhaps beyond those mountains and waters, in the greater world. There might come a force or a leader who would break Sparta's iron grip. It is a foolish fancy, but it comforts him enough to sleep. As dawn's first light touches the peaks, we gently leave Sparta. The image of Theron and Melite fades like shadows at morning. Through Greece, the pattern is set. Slavery is deeply woven into the fabric of society, even in the cradle of democracy and philosophy. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes all keep slaves. They are household servants, miners in Laurium's deadly shafts, porters, nurses, field hands. Some are treated decently, others cruelly, but none are free. The Greek world even has a proverb: one slave, one enemy. Many slaves, many enemies, reflecting the constant fear of revolt among masters. And indeed, slaves do resist in small ways, stealing moments of rest, feigning illness, preserving their cultures, or running away when chances arise. The Greek historian Herodotus tells us that on the eve of the Battle of Plataea against Persia, there were 7 helots for every Spartan warrior present, a reminder of how vast the unfree population was. Without those slaves, ancient Greek glory, its temples, its triumphs, might not have been possible. This contradiction between lofty ideals of freedom for citizens and utter subjugation of others is one of history's great ironies. Our journey must press on. We have further to travel, to distant realms beyond the Mediterranean. The warm winds of the Aegean fade as we soar eastward, far beyond Persia's old empire, to the vast lands of ancient China. Down below, the terrain shifts to broad river valleys and walled cities teeming with life. It is the 3rd century BC now, the turbulent era when the Qin state has conquered all others and the first emperor of China rules with absolute power. Imagine a sprawling construction site that stretches over hills and mountains as far as the eye can see. Thousands of men crawl over the landscape like ants, heaving baskets of earth, chiseling stones, erecting wooden palisades. We have arrived at the building of the Great Wall under Emperor Qin Shi Huang. The air is filled with dust and shouted orders. Drums beat to signal work shifts. The sun is merciless, though many laborers work through the night by bonfire light. Here, the concept of slavery takes a slightly different form. Many of these toilers are convicts, men punished for crimes or failure to pay taxes, now condemned to years of hard labor. Others are prisoners of war from the newly subjugated kingdoms, given a choice between execution or servitude. The emperor needs a wall to protect his newly unified realm's northern frontier, and he will drench the earth with sweat and blood to build it. Among the laborers is a man named Liu Shun. He was once a farmer from Qi province with a wife and baby daughter. Last year, after Qin's armies overran his land, he was conscripted to fight for them. At the Battle of Julu, he was caught trying to flee the carnage. For that offense, the punishment was 2. Penal servitude. Now Liu Shun wears an iron collar around his neck, marking him as a convict laborer. His hair has been shaved in the front, a sign of disgrace, and his feet are chained together by a long wooden yoke that forces him into small steps. Day after day, he carries rocks up a hillside to a fortification point. His hands are blistered raw. His back aches constantly. At night, he collapses in a makeshift barrack, hearing the groans of other men all around. Disease and injury claim many. Some simply do not wake up come morning. They say that for every stone in this wall, a life was spent. Liu Shun believes it. He has seen comrades collapse from exhaustion and never rise again. Their bodies are unceremoniously buried in pits nearby. Some whisper that the dead are even used as fill within the wall itself, entombed with the stones. Indeed, an old saying will arise from these times. Each stone of the Great Wall is mortared with a corpse. By some accounts, hundreds of thousands have perished here. Whether that is true or a later legend, standing here among the miserable ranks of workers, one can well imagine it. During a brief rest, Liu Shun leans on a pile of bricks and gazes out at the northern horizon. The distant plains shimmer. How far away his old life seems. He remembers the gentle sound of his daughter's laughter, the smell of steamed rice in his home. Now he has only rough mantu, bread, and millet gruel to eat, barely enough to sustain strength. He has heard that Emperor Qin boasted of having slave markets filled with people penned like cattle, and that one of the emperor's own ministers, Lu Buwei, kept over 10,000 slaves and bonded servants in his household. And here Liu Shun is, effectively one of them, a beast of burden for the empire. The overseer's gong signals the end of rest. With a sigh, Liu Shun forces himself upright and resumes his toil. As he hoists another basket of stones, a fellow convict next to him suddenly collapses to his knees, wheezing for breath. It is an older man, Orzu, a captured soldier from the border tribes. His face is ashen. The overseer strides over, yelling to get up. Orzu cannot. With a scowl, the overseer lifts his bamboo cane and strikes the man's back repeatedly. Orzu cries out, a horrible rasping sound. Liu Shun instinctively steps forward to shield the old man. "He's ill, sir. Please spare him," Liu pleads. The overseer, infuriated at this breach of discipline, cracks the cane across Liu's shoulder. Pain explodes, but Liu Shun holds his ground over Orzu's prone form. Perhaps something in Liu's desperate eyes causes the overseer to pause. More likely, he decides the old man isn't worth more hassle. With a curse, he stomps off, shouting for two others to drag Orzu away. Liu Shun knows what that means. Anyone too weak to work is often left to die outside the camp or sent to a far-off penal mine. A certain slow death. He silently bows his head as Orzu is carried off, too fearful to even say a proper farewell to the friend who had shared his sorrows these past months. The chain gang moves on, and Liu Shun labors until nightfall, nursing his bruised shoulder and heavier heart. At night, under the same moon that once glowed over Babylon and Athens, Liu Shun lies awake on the cold ground. Around him, men scratch at their flea bites or mutter in fever dreams. A few convicts quietly pray, some to Shangdi, the Lord on high, some to their ancestors, some to any deity that might listen. Liu Shun fingers a small token he keeps hidden in his sleeve, a chipped jade pendant that belonged to his wife. He prays to see his family again one day, though hope dims with each passing week. Suddenly, a soft voice speaks from the darkness. It's Yong, a scholar sentenced here for writing verses critical of the emperor. "Liu," he whispers, "recite that poem for me again. The one by Mozi." Mozi. Yes, Mozi was a philosopher who steadfastly opposed offensive warfare. Liu Shun doesn't recall all of it, but he summons what he can. In war, many are slain. In war, many are enslaved. This is the great misfortune of man. Yong nods and continues the thought, his voice barely more than a breath. Mozi said that to delight in war is to delight in the loss of life and freedom. So he urged mankind toward compassion and righteousness. Instead, the scholar's tone is bitterly wistful. Compassion seems an alien concept here. Liu Xun ponders those words. Indeed, it was war that made him what he is now, a slave in all but name. The wars of the warring states, which Emperor Qin ended by conquest, produced countless like him. Whole populations of defeated states were taken as bondservants or slaves. Many women were sold as servants to rich Qin households, children too. He remembers hearing that during famines, desperate parents sometimes sold their children rather than watch them starve. His own cousin had to do so, giving up her little son to a merchant, hoping he'd at least live. The cruelty of it all weighs on Liu's chest. Yet, ironically, he has also heard that the new Han dynasty, for whispers say Emperor Qin's regime is faltering and the Han will follow, is considering some reforms. Rumor among the convicts is that the Han's founder, once he seizes power, promises to free those who were enslaved unjustly under Qin. Could it be? The thought is a faint light. If he can just survive until then. We leave Liu Xun to his fitful dreams, dreams in which the Great Wall crumbles, and those trapped within it climb out, blinking into freedom. As we drift away from the camps, the wind carries the clang of hammers and the moans of the dying. The first emperor believed his reign and his works would last 10,000 years, but in truth they will collapse not long after his death. The wall will stand in parts, but the Qin dynasty will not. Still, slavery and forced labor are not ending here. They will persist in new guises under new rulers as the cycle of history rolls on. Our next destination lies to the southwest. Ancient India, a land of sacred rivers and ancient hymns, where the idea of spiritual freedom flourishes even as social hierarchies bind many in place. It is around the 3rd century BC, in the time of the Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya and his grandson Ashoka have forged a vast realm across the subcontinent. We find ourselves in the city of Pataliputra, the magnificent capital on the banks of the Ganges. The afternoon rain has just ceased, leaving the air fresh and the streets muddy. At a bustling crossroads near the marketplace, an imperial edict carved on a polished stone pillar stands for all to read. A crowd has gathered as a royal messenger reads its contents aloud. This is one of Emperor Ashoka's edicts, and it speaks of Dhamma, the righteous path. The messenger recites in a clear voice. Every caste and community deserves respect. The king commands kind treatment of servants and slaves. The trade in living beings is forbidden within the Maurya Empire. In the crowd, a slender man named Harish listens intently. Harish is a chariot driver by profession, a free man by status, though of low caste. Beside him stands his neighbor, an older woman named Devi, who was once a dasa, slave, but was freed years ago by a kindly mistress. Devi's lips tremble with emotion as she hears Ashoka's words. To think, an emperor acknowledging slaves as human and forbidding the slave trade. It feels revolutionary. Harish murmurs to Devi, "They say Emperor Ashoka was so moved by the suffering caused in his wars that he now seeks compassion for all. Perhaps this will improve life for many." Devi nods, wiping a tear. She remembers the days of her youth when slaves were often treated little better than cattle in some households. If Ashoka's decree is enforced, perhaps fewer will endure what she did. However, not everyone in the crowd is impressed. A stout merchant scoffs under his breath, The emperor can ban open slave markets, sure, but will that truly end slavery? People will just trade behind closed doors. And what of those already in bondage? Words will not free them. Hears this and frowns thoughtfully. It is true that slavery in India takes many forms that a single edict might not erase. There are those enslaved due to debt, sold as children, taken in war. There are those whose condition is barely distinguished from slavery, bonded laborers and serfs tied to their land. And there is the overarching caste system, a strict hierarchy that dictates a person's occupation and social standing from birth. Even if not called slaves, many of the lowest caste, the Shudras, lived only to serve the higher classes, and untouchables, outcasts, endured lives of degradation. Ancient law books like the Manusmriti and the Arthashastra reflect these complexities. Harish once heard a scholar explain that the Arthashastra of Kautilya dedicates an entire chapter to the institution of slavery. It absolutely forbids enslaving an Arya, a person of noble or free birth, but allows the enslavement of non-Aryas, foreigners, those captured in war, and those who sell themselves or their family members in desperation. That day, my heart ached with sorrow, but I also felt pride. Pride in what those black men had proven to the world in combat. I thought of Colonel Shaw, a white officer who had given his life leading black troops, and I whispered, "He done more in dying than 100 men would in living," echoing my sentiment about John Brown. The sacrifice of these martyrs only steeled my resolve to keep going. For 2 more years, I worked for the Union forces, tending to newly liberated people, scouting into Confederate territory, and nursing wounded soldiers in Virginia, a task I continued for some months, even after the Confederacy surrendered in April 1865. By war's end, I had the satisfaction of knowing I'd played a part, however small, in slavery's final downfall. In April 1865, when General Lee surrendered and word rippled out that the war was over, I was in a hospital camp in Virginia. I shall never forget the rejoicing that erupted among the freed people and black soldiers. Grown men shouted and embraced each other. Women fell to their knees, sobbing tears of joy. Children danced, not fully understanding, but happy because everyone else was. I simply sat down on a log and let the tears flow freely down my face. "Thank you, Lord," I whispered. "Thank you for letting me see this day. All the pain and struggle, all the prayers and peril, it had not been in vain." Chains were breaking everywhere, and the promise I had clung to all my life was being fulfilled. When I returned home to Auburn in the summer of 1865, I was bone-tired and battle-worn, yet filled with a quiet sense of victory. Slavery, that cruel beast, was dead. I had done my duty, on the battlefield and off. However, the end of the war did not bring an end to my personal challenges. I had spent over 3 years in Union service, but I was never properly paid my due. As for those enslaved due to debts or poverty, the Emperor urges mercy and help for them. Specific cases will be judged by the local courts. Devi lowers her eyes in acceptance. It's not an immediate emancipation for all, but it is something, a moral directive that might soften some hearts. As the crowd disperses, Harish escorts Devi back toward their neighborhood. On the way, they pass a grand estate. Through the gate, they see into a courtyard where servants are busy hanging dyed cloth and preparing decorations. What's the occasion? Harish wonders. They soon find out. A wedding feast is underway. The daughter of the house, a noble Brahmin lady, is being married. But Harish and Devi also notice, off to the side, a poignant scene. A young man, plainly dressed, stands with a stoic face as he watches the celebration from afar. By the shackles on his feet and the guard nearby, they realize he is a slave of the household. Devi recognizes him as Sanjit, one of the household's longtime slaves. The family is kind enough. He was treated relatively well, even educated to assist with the estate's accounting. But now that the lady of the house is marrying into another family, they are sending some of their slaves along as part of her dowry. Sanjit is among them. Essentially, he is a living part of the marriage gifts, like a piece of property to transfer. Devi and Harish exchange a sorrowful glance. Sanjit stands there with dignity, holding a ceremonial tray of gifts, awaiting to be handed over to new masters. One chapter of his life closes, another begins, without his say. This custom is common. Slaves can be given as gifts or included in a dowry exchange. It is an honor for the bride's family to present such assets. But what of Sanjit's own attachments? Perhaps he grew up here, has friends, maybe even a lover among the staff. Now all that is cut off. Devi sighs. She remembers when she was gifted to a distant cousin of her original owner. That is how she ended up in Pataliputra. Luckily, it eventually led to her freedom. But the pain of being uprooted still stings in memory. They watch as the wedding procession moves out. The bride in a glittering red sari, the groom on horseback. Behind follow carts of goods and servants, including Sanjit, chained to another male servant for the journey. His eyes briefly meet Devi's through the gate. In them she sees resignation and a flicker of fear. She offers a small prayer under her breath. May your new masters be kind, young man. May you find freedom one day. Then he is gone. That night, Devi lights a small oil lamp in her humble home. She sits before a worn clay figurine of Vishnu and meditates. In her heart, she harbors gratitude that she is free now. No one can sell her or beat her, and she earns her living as a seamstress. She also prays for those still in bondage. Perhaps, she thinks, if Ashoka's spirit of Dhamma prevails, people might start freeing their slaves, or at least treating them humanely. She has heard of one case in Magadha, where a master, upon hearing the new edicts, released all his slaves and gave them employment as free laborers. Small miracles, but true. Beyond her window, the city quiets down. A soft rain begins again, pattering on the roofs. Pataliputra's lights shimmer on puddles forming along the street, where a stray dog curls up for warmth. Somewhere, a lonely flute begins to play. Maybe a watchman passing time. The melody is soothing, wrapping the night in gentle sound. We leave Devi there in that peaceful moment, and as the flute's notes follow us, we drift further west and north, toward the Mediterranean once more, toward the final chapter of our journey. We have seen how slavery in various forms spanned the ancient world, from the sandy banks of the Nile to the bustling streets of Babylon, the olive groves of Greece, the stern valleys of Sparta, the colossal works of China, and the caste-bound towns of India. Everywhere, humans have held other humans in bondage, sometimes with justifications, sometimes with guilt, often with brutality. And everywhere, too, there have been those who yearned for freedom, and occasionally those who spoke against the practice or mitigated its excesses. Now, as the stars wheel overhead, we approach the mighty heart of an empire renowned for its legions and laws, Rome. It is the 1st century BC. The Roman Republic, though racked by internal strife, rules a vast territory around the Mediterranean. And at Rome's core lies an economy and society deeply dependent on slaves. It is here that the largest slave population of the ancient world is found. And here that a singular figure, a gladiator turned rebel, will challenge the chains more dramatically than any before him. The Italian countryside south of Rome, around 73 BC. Rolling hills and vineyards bask under the summer sun. At a distance, Mount Vesuvius stands, green with vineyards climbing its slopes. But beneath this idyllic surface simmers a tension, for these lands are dotted with great estates, latifundia, worked by armies of enslaved people. Many were brought from foreign wars. Gauls, Thracians, Greeks, Syrians, Nubians, and others, all thrown together under harsh overseers. They labor from dawn to dusk, plowing fields, tending olive groves, or herding livestock, all for the profit of absentee Roman landlords. Our focus narrows to one such estate near Capua. In the open yard of a gladiatorial ludus training school, a group of men are practicing combat drill. They are slaves too, but of a particular sort. Trained fighters, kept for the bloody entertainment of the arena. Clad in simple tunics and wielding wooden practice swords, they move through thrusts and parries under the watchful eye of a burly instructor with a whip. Among them is a man of about 30, tall and strong, with intelligent eyes and a scar across his cheek. His name is Spartacus. Born in Thrace, a region northeast of Greece, Spartacus was once a free warrior of his tribe. He even served in the Roman army for a time, perhaps as an auxiliary, learning their tactics. But something went awry. Perhaps he deserted, unwilling to serve conquerors, or he was captured in a border skirmish. Either way, he ended up in chains and was sold as a slave. Recognizing his physical prowess, the Romans sent him to this gladiator school owned by Lentulus Batiatus in Capua. Here, Spartacus has been trained to fight with sword and shield as a Murmillo gladiator, a heavyweight class armed with a short sword, gladius, and a large oblong shield. They taught him to kill for sport. But in Spartacus's heart burns a fierce independence that refuses to be extinguished. As Spartacus goes through the motions of training, sweat glistening on his bronze skin, his mind is elsewhere. He is thinking of the plan. He and a group of other gladiators have spent weeks secretly plotting an escape. They know the risks. If caught, they will be tortured or killed. But if they do nothing, they face death anyway in the arena, one by one, for the amusement of the crowds. Better to die fighting for freedom than to die for spectacle, Spartacus reasons. He casts a subtle glance toward two of his co-conspirators, Crixus and Oenomaus, Gallic gladiators built like oxen. They exchange the faintest nod. The time is nearly ripe. Rumor has it their initial plot was betrayed and some men taken away. But about 70 of them remain ready to act. They had to improvise when the alarm was raised, grabbing whatever they could as weapons, kitchen knives and spits from the cookhouse, and fighting their way out of the barracks. Now, at twilight, the moment comes. It happens in a flash. Spartacus, during a mock duel, turns and cracks his wooden sword against the head of a guard rather than his sparring partner. The guard crumples. In the same heartbeat, Crixus lunges at the drill instructor, wrestling away his whip. Another gladiator snatches the keys from the stunned gatekeeper. A shout, A surge, and the gladiators overpower the few guards on site. They spill into the armory and storehouse, seizing real swords, shields, whatever arms they can find. Spartacus rallies them, about 72 men in all. "Brothers," he calls, hefting a stolen gladius, feeling the weight of real steel. "This day we win our freedom or meet the gods." A ragged cheer answers him. They break out of the compound, rushing along the road. By fate's grace, they encounter wagons carrying more weapons destined for another city's arena. The drivers flee at the sight of armed slaves. Spartacus laughs as they pry open the crates. Inside are swords, helmets, and other arms. Now they are decently equipped, and none in the vicinity can stop them. Night falls as they reach the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. There, among the wooded heights, Spartacus and his band set up a rough camp. Runaway slaves from nearby fields begin to trickle in, drawn by rumors of a breakout. By dawn, their numbers have grown. Men and women both, field hands, house servants, anyone bold enough to run has come to join them. Some bring pitchforks or sickles. Their only tools turn to weapons. Spartacus, Crixus, and Oenomo find themselves chosen as leaders by the group. Naturally, since they have battle experience. Spartacus, in particular, emerges as the soul of the rebellion. Level-headed, charismatic, and visionary. Around a small fire, he speaks to the growing crowd. Imagine him addressing them in a low, fervent voice. "We have escaped the whip and the sword of the arena, but our fight is not over. The Romans will come for us. Of that you can be sure. We must be ready. I know not all of you are warriors. Many of you have never held a sword, but each of you has the strength of a just cause. We fight for our freedom, for our families, for our right to live as humans, not as beasts." An older farm slave steps forward, raising his hand. "But where can we go? Even if we beat them once, more will come. Rome is vast," Spartacus nods. "Our aim is not to conquer Rome. Our aim is to win our freedom and leave Roman territory by returning to our homelands, if we can. Over those mountains to the north." He points vaguely toward the distant Apennines. "Beyond them lies the way out of Italy. If we can reach the Alps, we can disperse, each to his own land. Gauls back to Gaul, Thracians to Thrace, and so on. The Romans will not follow us beyond their borders, with so many other wars to occupy them." A murmur of hope runs through the crowd. Go home. Yes, that is what many dream of. Spartacus's own heart aches with that dream. To see Thrace again, its wild hills, perhaps to find his kin, if they yet live. And by his side, he has someone dear, his wife, a prophetess from his tribe, who was enslaved with him and joined in the escape. She stands quietly at the edge of the firelight, pride and worry mingling in her eyes as she watches Spartacus take on his mantle of leadership. She had foreseen something like this. Legend says that when Spartacus was first brought to Rome in chains, a snake coiled around his sleeping face, and she interpreted it as an omen of great and fearsome power that would bring him to a tragic end. She hasn't told Spartacus the full prophecy, though perhaps he senses the weight of fate on his shoulders. In the following days, the rebels on Vesuvius organize themselves. Spartacus drills the able-bodied in simple formations. They improvise shields from wicker and animal hide, make spears from wooden poles. They have few horses, so they fight on foot mostly. Their numbers swell as more slaves from the countryside escape to join them. Far and wide, the whisper spreads. Slaves, have risen up. They have defeated their masters and taken up arms. Come, join the brotherhood of the free Roman citizens in nearby villas grow nervous. Some flee to towns for safety. The Roman authorities respond, but initially they underestimate these runaways. They dispatch a local militia under a praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber, a small force of perhaps 3,000, thinking it's sufficient to surround a ragtag band of slaves. Glaber corners Spartacus and his people on a high, craggy hill of Vesuvius, placing guards on the one narrow path down. It looks like the rebels are trapped. My story might have ended that day, but my legacy lives on. In the many years since I left this earth, people have remembered me in songs and statues, books and legends. They've called me an American hero, an icon of courage and freedom. And I suppose I am. But when the night is deep and quiet, and someone speaks my name in reverence, I hope they also feel the simple truth behind it, that I was just an ordinary woman whom God called to extraordinary purpose. I had the quiet courage to follow the call of liberty, step by step, no matter how dark the path, and to trust that a brighter morning lay ahead. Now, dear friend, as you lie here listening in the gentle darkness, perhaps you can feel a bit of my journey in your own soul. The world around us may be dark sometimes, but above us the stars still shine, steady, faithful, guiding. When you face trials, remember my story and the North Star that guided me. Remember that every soul longs for freedom, and every soul carries a light within. If ever you feel lost or burdened or in need of courage, picture me by your side, a small black woman in a faded shawl, humming a soothing tune and pointing upward to that star that never falters. Keep going, I would whisper to you. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going. Back in Rome, the Senate is alarmed. What they dismissed as a minor slave uprising is now a serious threat to the Republic's order. In 72 BC, they send not one but two consular armies to crush Spartacus. One, led by Lucius Gellius, goes after the band led by Crixus. For by now the rebel army had split into two main groups, one under Spartacus, another under the Gaul Crixus. Manages to ambush Crixus's contingent and defeats it in a pitched battle. Brave Crixus falls, fighting to the end. When Spartacus hears of his comrade's death, he is deeply grieved. Some say he honored Crixus by forcing captured Roman soldiers to duel to the death at his tomb, a grim gladiatorial tribute. Though whether that really happened or was an invention of fearful Romans is hard to say. In any case, Spartacus now leads the remaining main host of rebels, tens of thousands strong, and he hungers to avenge Crixus. The other consul, Gnaeus Lentulus, approaches Spartacus's force from the north, hoping to bottle him up in the south. But Spartacus's tactical genius outplays them. In successive engagements, Spartacus's forces defeat each consul's army, one after the other. The once dismissive Roman chronicles now acknowledge that the slaves repeatedly showed they could withstand or defeat the Roman military, from local patrols to Roman militia to even trained legions under consular command. One can imagine the astonishment in Rome. How can slaves, an untrained rabble in Roman eyes, defeat legions led by consuls? It's as if the world turned upside down. Spartacus presses northward with his victorious throng. They reach as far as Cisalpine Gaul in the north of Italy. The Alps loom in the distance, the gateway to freedom for many. Spartacus's plan, as we glean, is to send everyone home once they cross those mountains. Yet here a fateful turn occurs. Many of the rebels, flush with success, do not want to disperse. Italy lies open before them, rich and ripe for plunder. Why leave now? They argue to stay, perhaps even to march on Rome itself. Though Spartacus likely knows attacking Rome head-on would be folly. Another factor: by now, not all the rebels are former slaves. Some are impoverished free farmers or herdsmen who joined for adventure or loot. Their motivations differ. The cohesion is fraying. Against his own judgment, Spartacus yields to the majority's desire. He turns his forces back from the Alps, and they move south again. Perhaps he also hopes to find ships to sail to Sicily, to spark a slave uprising there in that island's vast latifundia. Sicily had seen 2 great servile wars in the past, and discontent still simmered. Indeed, Spartacus attempts to make a deal with Cilician pirates to transport part of his army to Sicily, intending to incite rebellion there and gain reinforcements. Unfortunately, the pirates betray him. They take his payment and abandon the arrangement. Spartacus is stranded in Bruttium, Calabria, the toe of Italy. Now Rome, nearly in a panic, finally commits its full might to the war. They appoint Marcus Licinius Crassus to supreme command, giving him 8 legions, a massive force of possibly 40,000 to 50,000 trained soldiers. Crassus is determined to end this revolt and seize glory and political clout for himself. He drives his men mercilessly, even reviving the ancient punishment of decimation, executing 1 in 10 men of units that showed cowardice, to instill fear and obedience. With such ruthless discipline, he forces the Roman legions to confront their dread and hatred of the slave army. Crassus manages to corner Spartacus's forces in the far south, near the peninsula of Rhegium, and builds a massive trench and rampart across its narrowest point to hem them in. A stalemate ensues as winter approaches. Within the rebel camp, supplies dwindle. Tension rises. A group of Gaul and German fighters splits off, perhaps frustrated with inaction, attempting to break through the Roman lines or forage. Crassus pounces on them, annihilating thousands. The noose tightens. On a gray day in early spring of 71 BC, Spartacus resolves to make one last, desperate attempt to break free. Rather than wither slowly in entrapment, he will face the legions in a pitched battle. Some accounts say that on the eve of this final battle, Spartacus performed a dramatic gesture. He brought forth his horse, a fine steed that had carried him through many fights, and in front of his troops he slew the horse with his sword, declaring that if they won, he would have many horses to choose from, and if they lost, he would no longer need one. This was to show them that he intended to stand and fight to the death, not to retreat. The morning of battle arrives. Spartacus assembles his followers. Perhaps 30,000 remain against a similar number of Roman soldiers. The rebels know the odds are against them, but there is nowhere left to run. Spartacus himself prepares for combat in grim silence. He straps on whatever bits of armor he has scavenged. Perhaps he recalls the journey that led here, from the Thracian hills to Roman servitude, to gladiator school, to general of an army of outcasts. His wife, the prophetess, is no longer by his side. History does not record her fate. She may have perished or parted along the way. But Spartacus stands not alone. He is surrounded by thousands who trust him with their lives. Spartacus addresses his army one more time. Perhaps he simply says, "It has been an honor to fight beside you, free men and free women." Today we show Rome that, although they can break our bodies, they can never break our spirit. Whatever happens, remember that we fought as free people. Now lift up your weapons, and may the gods grant us victory. A hoarse roar answers him, ragged but full of defiance. The battle is fierce and bloody. On the plains of Apulia, near the Silarus River, the two forces collide. Spartacus fights with the strength of 10 men, determined to cut his way to Crassus himself. He knows that if he can strike down the Roman general, it might throw the legions into disarray. His gladiator training serves him well. Many a Roman soldier falls to his blade that day. Plutarch says Spartacus even sought out Crassus on the battlefield and cut down 2 centurions who tried to bar his way to the Roman commander. At one point, Spartacus and a small bodyguard do break through toward Crassus's position. The battlefield swirls with chaos, dust clouds, screams, the clash of iron. Spartacus spots Crassus, identifiable by his ornate helmet and the knot of officers around him. With a primal shout, Spartacus charges, hoping to end the battle in one blow by slaying the Roman general. But fate intervenes. Accounts say Spartacus was wounded in the thigh by a spear amid the melee. He drops to one knee, his leg useless. Enemies surge around him, pressing from all sides. Spartacus, though bleeding and now fighting on his knees, raises his shield and swings his sword, continuing to struggle fiercely. He refuses to surrender. Like a lion at bay, he makes his last stand. Some of his comrades rush to protect him, but the weight of disciplined legionaries is gradually overwhelming. Elsewhere across the plain, pockets of rebel resistance are being encircled and cut down. In Spartacus's final moments, if we could pause time, perhaps he has a flash of vision. Memories of his wife's smile, of the taste of freedom in those early days on Vesuvius, of Teramon the Egyptian singing to endure his toil, of R.D. the scribe shedding a tear for a mother and child in the slave market, of Kira the Athenian slave humming her island song, of Theron and Melit clinging to each other in the Spartan night, of Liu Shun doggedly carrying stones on the Great Wall, of Devi bravely questioning the royal messenger. All the innumerable souls who have suffered bondage through the ages. Does Spartacus realize he has become a symbol far greater than himself? That, in this singular battle cry, he stands for every human being who ever yearned to throw off his chains. Perhaps not consciously. He is immersed in the immediate struggle, muscle and pain, and the roar of blood in his ears. But somewhere in his warrior's heart, he surely knows this cause is just. With a final roar of defiance, Spartacus hurls himself toward the oncoming Romans. The ring of swords closes in on him. He fights on bravely, taking many wounds. At last, as the press of legionaries becomes overwhelming, Spartacus is borne down. He disappears beneath a pile of bodies. Some say his corpse was never definitively found after the battle, lost among the heaps of slain. Thus died Spartacus, the gladiator who dared defy an empire. When the dust settles, the rebellion is over. Crassus surveys the carnage, grim but triumphant. He has lost many men, but he has secured the victory. Pompey, returning from Spain, arrives in time only to mop up some fleeing rebels, which he is quick to claim added credit for. Crassus resolves to make a brutal example of the survivors. Some 6,000 rebel prisoners are crucified along the Appian Way, the main highway leading into Rome. For mile after mile, crosses line the road, a ghastly forest of agony and death, meant to deter any future slave uprisings by sheer terror. We can imagine a traveler coming upon that scene in the following days. The moans of the dying carried on the breeze, crows circling overhead, the sickly stench of blood and sweat in the spring air. And on each cross, a once hopeful soul now trapped in excruciating finality. Among them may have been people whose stories we touched. If Melite later joined Spartacus's cause, she might hang there. If Liu Xun somehow made his way west to Italy, a fanciful stretch, but in spirit he's there, his suffering might end there. If Sanjit ever sought freedom again, perhaps he too met a Roman cross. Even if not literally, countless unique lives ended on those crosses, each with their own tale of despair and brief, blazing hope. Yet, in this grim aftermath, Spartacus's legacy begins to grow. For those who suffer and those who yearn, he becomes a legend, the slave who shook the foundations of the Republic. Roman historians, seeking to downplay him, would often frame the revolt as mere brigandage or a desperate bid to escape Italy. One, Appian, suggests Spartacus simply wished to lead his people out of Italy safely, not change society, while another, Florus, dramatizes it as if the slaves intended to seize Rome itself. Whatever the intentions, the effect was enormous. The name Spartacus would echo through time as a symbol of the fight for freedom. The philosopher Voltaire, over 1,800 years later, would call Spartacus's war the only just war in history. Revolutionaries like Toussaint Louverture, who led a slave revolt in Haiti, and many others in modern times, would invoke Spartacus as an inspiration. But those later reverberations lie far ahead in the future. For now, in the year 71 BC, dusk falls quiet over the Italian countryside once more. The crosses along the Appian Way stand silent, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Perhaps we focus on one cross in particular, where a dying rebel gazes at the first stars appearing overhead. In his fading consciousness, maybe he thinks of Spartacus, not with despair, but with a kind of sorrowful pride. They dared, he thinks. For a while we lived as free men. With his last breaths, that rebel might attempt a final song, a gentle lullaby from his homeland to comfort himself in pain, or a hymn to a god of freedom. The words are lost to the evening breeze, but the feeling remains, a strange peace, even in defeat, knowing they struck a blow for the dignity of the enslaved. We drift upward, leaving behind the sight of those crosses receding into the distance. Higher and higher we rise until the Italian peninsula is just a shape below. And then, even that dissolves into memory. We float once more in the quiet night air of the present, carrying with us the echoes of the past. All those voices. Teramon the Egyptian, Ardi the Babylonian, Kira the Athenian, Theron and Melite the Helots, Liu Xun the convict, Devi the freedwoman, Spartacus and his brave comrades. They form a solemn, magnificent chorus across time. What did they tell us? Perhaps that the yearning for freedom is universal, a constant across all eras and lands. That human dignity is a flame which can be dimmed but never fully extinguished. They remind us that compassion and justice are needed, that no human should be reduced to a mere instrument or living tool of another's will. In the dark tapestry of history, these voices of the oppressed shine like threads of gold for those who listen. They have guided our hearts tonight through empathy and understanding. Now, feel the weight of the journey you have taken. Your mind has walked in ancient footsteps. Your heart has ached and hoped with people long gone. Let the emotion settle gently within you. There is sadness, yes, for so much suffering endured. But there is also a profound sense of kinship, a connection across millennia to all those souls who kept alive that spark of freedom which we cherish so dearly today. Allow yourself now to drift back down from the heights of history. Return to the present moment, to the softness of your bed or chair, to the safety and warmth of your room. But carry with you the gentle murmurs of that ancient chorus. Hear Teramun's lullaby in the desert dusk, Ardi's lament by the Euphrates, Kyra's soft humming under the olive tree, Theron's whispered vow beneath the stars, Liu Xun's prayer on the wind-swept wall, Davy's hopeful voice in the crowd, and Spartacus's final cry turning into a quiet voice on the breeze. All these blend into a single melody now, the song of freedom. It is a song that soothes even as it stirs the soul, a song whose notes carry courage in one breath and peace in the next. Let it cradle you now. You have traveled far and seen much. You deserve rest and solace. As you close your eyes, imagine a vast open field under a night sky spangled with stars. In that field gather the spirits of all those we met on this journey. They are free now, free from pain, free from fear, free from bondage. Teramun stands tall, smiling gently at the Egyptian boy who once gave him water. Ardi and the old Hebrew beggar sit side by side, quietly sharing a tune. Kira dances lightly in the grass, no longer worried about any master's call. Theron and Melody walk hand in hand, safe at last, marveling at the night sky without dread. Liu Xun and the scholar Yang stand by a crumbled section of ancient wall, nodding in quiet relief. Devi embraces Sanjit, who is no longer a slave but a friend. And Spartacus? Spartacus stands apart just a little, with his arm around his Thracian wife. They watch over the gathering like proud hosts, a soft contentment on Spartacus's face. In this vision, no one is higher or lower. None are masters and none slaves. They light a bonfire and sit in its warm glow. Spartacus takes a wineskin and pours a libation on the earth, an offering of thanks for deliverance and solidarity. The flames dance and sparks rise to meet the stars. Someone begins to sing, perhaps the Thracian prophetess, intoning a soothing chant to the night. One by one, the others join in different tongues, a gentle harmony carrying on the breeze. You listen to their song and feel all tension easing from your body. It is as if they are singing a lullaby meant for all of humanity, a lullaby of unity, born from shared suffering and shared hope, a lullaby that promises that dawn will come. Every note seems to whisper, "You are free, you are valued, you are not alone." Breathe deeply and let their voices lull you. In this peaceful moment, across time and space, we are all connected by the simple truth that every life yearns for dignity and peace. The struggles of the past have not been in vain, for they guide our hearts toward compassion in the present. Feel your eyelids growing heavy now. The journey through centuries has been long, but it has brought you understanding, empathy, and a gentle resolve. The night is kind around you. The souls of the past keep watch, like guardian stars. When you sleep, may you dream of open fields and starlight, of walking side by side with those brave souls, sharing stories without fear or fetters. And when you wake, may the world seem a bit brighter, the air of freedom a bit sweeter, thanks to the wisdom and empathy you have gained. For now, let go. Float on the melody of the ages into a deep, restorative slumber. Freedom, that softest pillow for the soul, is yours tonight, cradling your mind and heart. Sleep well, dear friend, knowing that in the grand story of humanity, there is a shining thread of courage and goodness that nothing can sever. The song continues, softly and surely, and you are part of it. Good night and sweet dreams.